Okay, we're live. Okay, we've done our Hunger Games countdown. We're ready to go. We're here today so let me first start by saying I was supposed to be in my office. The windows are being done in my house. If there's a crash, we're going to keep going. So everybody can just be aware of that if you hear some weird sound. But I am Jenn. I go by Jenn the Tutor because that was the easiest thing to find on the internet. And I am joined today by Stephanie and Sydney and Akil, who's now kind of famous since the last time we talked. I mean, famous, legit famous.
Number 2 on Netflix, yo.
Oh, you were number 2. And Stephanie, for some reason, I can't unmute your mic, so just feel free. But I guess your big quote from Varsity Blues, which was in the trailer, is, do you remember your quote?
No, not really.
Is they had every advantage and yet they still cheated. Do you remember that?
I do.
And then my favorite, another Akil-ism, is at the end there. You were essentially like, y'all could just apply to other schools and not play this game. Did you all know that? So Akil, let me actually first go with Stephanie and then Sydney. Can y'all introduce yourselves to the audience?
Okay.
Well, hi, I'm Stephanie Sylla. I go to CD Hylton in Woodbridge, Virginia, and I'm a senior this year.
Sydney?
Hi, I'm Sydney Dadson. I forgot to put my last name on here, but I'm also a senior at CD Hylton High School.
Okay, and then Akil, do you want to introduce yourself to those who don't know?
I am Akil Bello. I am an internet troublemaker. What do you want to know? Formal title is Senior Director of Advocacy and Advancement at FairTest. I have been in test prep and college access for about 30 years now. I got 2 sons and an internet daughter, and I did not go to Howard, but I'm repping Howard on my hoodie today.
Okay. So, the first question, and I actually find this to be fascinating. Sydney and Stephanie, did you know about Varsity Blues before this documentary? Or did you know about, when the scandal came out, did you guys even hear about it? Sydney, no. I'll start with you. Oh, okay.
I didn't, but I always knew that, people kind of paid their way into certain schools. It was kind of a thing you knew but didn't know or whatever. But I didn't know about,
Yeah, I would say.
I just knew that it was Olivia Jade who got caught up for it. I didn't know it was, a whole ring of rich people buying buildings for schools.
Okay, Stephanie?
Yeah, I agree with Sydney. I knew things were going on, but I didn't recognize that it was so organized, I guess.
It's funny to me, Akil, because it's for us, it was was it a big deal for you when it came out?
No. I mean, I think
it led to Netflix.
Yeah, but that's nothing. I mean, that's TV drama. So my perception of the whole thing is it's America. You can pick an industry, and within that industry, if there's money to be made, somebody is running a scam. And it's only a question of who's running the scam and whether they got caught.
Right.
I don't think there's any pure industries left in the country.
Jenn the Tutor is pretty pure.
But should we run down the tutoring scams? Should we run down the tutoring scams? Just go ahead and Google Esikoff in Long Island, who was letting people pay him $5,000. $500,000 actually made me laugh because there's the dude in Long Island who was doing it
done cheaper.
Right. Yeah. So, I don't know. What's your number, Jenn? I think
I would not take it. I would have testing anxiety. I can tutor you how to do a perfect test. I've had perfect scores. I could never pull off a perfect test. So good luck. I would say, I was trying to get that wrong, so it didn't set off the system. Does that make sense?
That's
yeah.
No. I don't know if I can pull off a perfect test either because I just don't care enough.
Yeah.
I can't be that careful.
Yeah.
Right? But it wasn't even the perfect test that they were playing with. They were just getting a better score than they had.
Right.
Right. So, I did it in high school. I cheated twice on the SAT in high school. I took it from friends of mine. back in 1988, I got fake ID.
Oh
I got
my
fake.
God.
So here's the fun, right? This is like full circle of my life. In 1988, I'm doing okay on the test. My friends are like, yo, you're going to take it for me. Like, I pay you $50. And I'm like, yes, I'm down. So for $50, I took it for one friend in March. Well, like whatever, 6 weeks later, scores, like we get a letter. My friend gets a letter. He calls me up. He's like, yo, they sent me a letter saying, do you want to cancel your scores? Because we think you cheated because you scored too high. Because he had taken it before.
Oh my
But the
God.
day he got the letter, I was taking it for another friend.
Mm.
so they both got busted and they just canceled the score.
Okay.
So this ain't new. People have been doing it for years. Many times people get busted. Usually it's just they send you a letter saying, we think you cheated. And as a teenager who did cheat, you say, yes, please cancel the score. Let's pretend that didn't happen. Right?
And no consequences.
Right.
No consequences.
What's fascinating about it is that folks were caught and it was turned into this great big thing. And the amount of money that was being thrown around.
Sydney, you had like a lot of like, so we have a group chat and Sydney was blowing it up while she was watching. Sydney, what was your impression of Operation Varsity Blues? And then Stephanie, I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch. I didn't tell Stephanie to watch before. Oops, sorry. But Sydney, what was your impression of Operation Varsity Blues?
It was just very interesting to see how people, especially people's parents, idolized certain schools. It wasn't that they were trying to get their kids into any school or like, pursue them into a certain major. It was like, no, you need to get into this school or like our family will like just like be destroyed and blah, 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 all this stuff. You need to go to Yale, otherwise I've failed at life. And like, I just like, it was such an exorbitant amount of money. Like I asked my dad, cause I was watching it with him and I was like, so how much is it? Like a couple $100,000. He was like, they're definitely donating a couple million, if that. And then it was crazy because it was like that couple million isn't even guaranteed to get your kid in the school. And I was just like, wow, like if we stopped idolizing these schools, this wouldn't have been such a problem. Or just like encouraging your kid, even getting into any college is, something to be celebrating.
Right. And Stephanie, do you feel the pressure to close at certain schools or do certain things for admissions? You and I have talked about this offline, but what about you? What's your thoughts?
For me, I put a lot of more pressure on myself, and especially being like a firstborn American, like my parents, they worked really hard to get here. So it's like now I kind of feel a little bit of pressure from the rest of my family. They're like, okay, we worked hard to get here, so now let's see what you're going to be able to do. But I mean, I try not to feed too much into it because I know that can be very toxic and it can take you down the wrong route. So,
Akil, what do you feel like didn't get into Operation Varsity Blues that you wish had gotten in?
Ooh.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, so I think what's interesting about the documentary, right, is that every time you see a film, it's the filmmaker's story. So there's always something that I want because it ain't my film, right?
So you're gonna make a documentary?
Nah.
So you're gonna write a book?
One of your wonderful people to make the documentary, and then I'll consult with them and help frame the story. So what I would have wanted was more of an exploration of the obsession with those schools, the shifts in U.S. education that has perpetuated the obsession with particular institutions. More, I like data. I would have loved to have seen a list of all the schools involved. I think Georgetown got off the hook. UT Austin wasn't mentioned.
Off the top.
Right? But Georgetown was part of it. UT Austin was part of it. There are other places that were part of it that were sort of interesting. And I think there's a lot of interesting things that are demonstrated in this scandal about how we perceive prestige. Because this isn't about education. This is about prestige and branding, right? These people perceived the schools they were choosing to be Prada, right? To be Yeezys. Like, to me, this is all about trying to get Yeezys. Like, there's no world in which I will ever purchase Yeezys. Because
Sydney,
they're Adidas. They're dressed up Adidas. Like, who the hell? Like, just get yourself some Adidas and save $700. Like, why the hell would you do that?
Sydney's unmuting because I think she has something to say.
No, I was just listening.
Yeah. You just muted yourself.
I was muted.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a strange obsession. But I'm also not a brand conscious individual. I actually sort of hate branding. I won't buy Yeezys because of Kanye. So Kanye can't convince me to buy the shoes. He can convince me not to buy the shoes. Right? I actually fight with my kid all the time. I have a 15-year-old who loves sneakers, and I was trying to get him to buy sneakers that weren't endorsed by an athlete. Now, apparently, those don't exist anymore.
Oh,
like everything is a KD or a something. Like, but you know,
well,
I didn't want. What's that?
What Converse?
He's a basketball player.
Kamala,
Yeah,
right?
for
So
basketball.
Converse is Kamala, and then you have Allbirds, which is I think connected to Obama. Like even politicians are now endorsing their favorite shoes.
Yeah, but like wearing the ones you like and sort of the tacit endorsement is different from like what I'm thinking about in sneaker branding, right? Especially for basketball sneakers. Every model of sneaker is endorsed by pretty much some athlete. So it's really actually hard to buy sneakers that aren't somebody's brand, right? And I think that says a lot about kind of where we are in colleges. In the 80s, it wasn't like that. In the 80s, one or two people had a brand name sneaker. Jordan really started everybody with a brand. I think the same thing has happened to colleges. In the 80s, you know, Harvard might have had a 30% admission rate, right? It wasn't just Harvard or die. But now, again, the obsession with branding has really sort of come to the forefront. And I think Varsity Blues is the criminalization of what we've been doing anyway.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to skip because I have a list of questions here. Sydney came up with some questions. Stephanie and I have talked about some questions as well. But I'm going to skip to this question. Varsity Blues for me hasn't changed that much. I feel like COVID actually changed more than Varsity Blues. What are legal ways that people are still cheating to get their kids into college, in your impression? And Sydney and Stephanie, after Akil goes, if you know of any things that kids are doing to like get perceived advantages. But Akil.
In what sense? Like with recipes?
Well, I mean, getting a leg up.
Okay.
Right?
Hiring you. Stephanie
Yeah. You are the leg up.
They didn't hire me though.
You're the cheater. Okay. So like, but you're the cheater, right? Like, so that's the thing that's really fascinating. All of this, right? Is that like, it's levels.
Well,
right? When does it rise to criminality?
Right. I actually watched Varsity Blues unfold, and I was like, okay. I'm going to just operate in that way. I'm just going to operate as if I am rich and entitled, and I'm just going to be as aggressive as a dance mom would be getting their kid to the top spot. And if that means that I have to tweet you and call you out and, you know, put your president on an email, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get this money and get these kids in and shame you if I have to.
And that to me that's the good and the bad here, right? Like, so if you continue to do that, and I sit there and I watch you on Twitter and I'm like, yo, Jenn is wilding and she is so damn good. Because you will get on and you will make things happen. Yeah. Right? Now, the level of access you have, let's multiply that by $1 million. Right? We throw some money into that. Right, to change it from on Twitter to you get to fly to the campus where you've maybe sent 10 students before who were full pay and the admissions office knows your name. Yeah. Right? Like, I mean, is it cheating or is it just wielding influence?
Is it cheating or is it because of certain students we don't consider it to be cheating? Right? If it's,
so there's that, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, when does wielding influence become cheating? Right? And the feds drew the line with Operation Varsity Blues. They said
no. As somebody, I was telling a friend who's on here right now yesterday. It's like dawn raids. If somebody calls you and you wake up and you're like, what time is it? And you're like, oh, it's 6 a.m. I wonder why this client's calling me. And they're like, the feds are at my house. You're like, tell them that we're taking the deal, because feds don't come to your house at before dawn unless if you want the feds at your house midday. You want the feds at your house afternoon. If the feds are waking you up, that's a problem that you can't, and they're coordinating raids. So when I'm hearing this as somebody who used to hear, oh, I can't give your kid a lower sentence because there was so much manpower that went into this, I'm thinking 14 months for a federal raid at dawn and wiretaps. How much money did we spend for a 14-month sentence?
Yeah.
And
the sentences were a joke. No,
it's a PR stunt to me.
Yes, it was embarrassment. It was a PR stunt. There was no real penalty behind it, which is fascinating.
That really made me upset. Sorry for interrupting, but that really made me upset because it's like, you know, okay, I feel like the embarrassment was more like damaging than I guess the sentences were, but it was just rich people with good lawyers getting away with everything. I think one lady got maybe like a couple days, like less than a week. I was just like, you have kids, like, not to be dramatic, you have kids like going on hunger strikes because they didn't get into the college that they wanted to, and you got in fraudulently, and when you got caught up, you didn't face the same consequences as, you know, other people. Like there's moms who like forge their addresses so their kids can get into better schools and perform better and like give their kids a chance, and that's what they have to do, and they're getting years. When you paid money openly to a man to get your kid into a college that they didn't want to go to in the first place, and then 14, like, what is that? I just looked at it and I laughed.
Stephanie, what do you think? Like when you're looking at these sentences and like the punishment, what are you thinking about that?
I mean, for me, it's just, I feel like that's just how things happen. You know, like I'm not really like, I don't get surprised or shocked by any of these things because that's just the way things have been in this country for a long time. Yeah. So it's like now, like once you accept that, you try to think of the next step. How do we fix this? Right. And you're kind of like, and what am I supposed to do about that? Yeah.
And that's a funny thing because we hear all the time, like the new test optional like rebuttal is like, but like every part's inequitable. So like, what are you going to do? Like every part's inequitable and the essays are inequitable, which to me, they're like, and low income students don't even have a teacher. And I'm like, have y'all read some of these essays coming from teachers? Like, they're not that great. Like, honestly, I've read some, but also it's an assumption that low income kids can't write without and all this other stuff. Akil, when you think about the impact of Varsity Blues, the impact of COVID, where we're at now, your invention of this term highly rejective, where do you feel like we're at admissions wise? And what were you doing when you came up with the term highly rejective? Because I feel like everybody thinks this was like this deep moment. And I feel like maybe you were like eating a cracker and then you like put out a tweet and people were like, yeah.
So, okay, there's a lot of things tied up in there. Let's see. So, I mean, Varsity Blues to me is a talking point around college access. It's not a new talking point. It's not a new concept. It's not a new conversation piece, but it is bringing new people into the conversation, right? And I think the best thing about Varsity Blues is that you have other people who wouldn't be paying attention to education, looking at education and looking at how the system is sometimes gamed. And that hopefully will help create a fairer society, right? I think we pretend in America that this is a meritocracy. This, it's still wealth. And to be honest, if you have money, you're always going to apply the money to every problem. That's just how it works. Right? If I can't get to work on time, I'm gonna jump in an Uber if I can afford it. So I won't be late, and the person who can't afford the Uber will be late. So this ain't new, this ain't different. This is just what it is. The question is, at what point, again, does it become criminal, unfair influence that we need to do something about, right? And I think
do you feel
that's
like
the challenge.
do you feel like there needs to just be a little unfairness? Like, do you feel like it can be fair for everyone? Because either way, someone is always going to have like the upper hand, like you said with the Uber or like getting into colleges. Like,
And by the way, when I was working as a lawyer, I was making too much money to care about being late. So it's like I could lose it. I was like, I can lose this job. I have money in the bank. But go ahead, yeah, Sydney. Yeah, that was a great question.
I think that we should always strive to make things to attempt to create equity. Not to make things fair, but to attempt to create equity. So we should tilt the scales towards those who have the least. So I don't want fairness. I want to tilt the scales the other way. I want to tilt the scales in favor of poor kids. So I think we need to do everything as possible that we can to prevent wealth from winning. Now, that being said, I understand colleges are businesses. Colleges need money to survive. So how are they going to be like, you know what? Let's create a system where the people who could pay full pay and don't need financial aid can't get in.
Yeah.
Like, how are they going to survive if they do that?
Because then if we're sending kids to good schools to end up in great careers to make money, won't they also end up being parents who use their money to fix their problem? It's just never
exactly.
I feel like
right. So how do we solve that, right?
But one thing,
I think it has to be just constant effort to work for the public good, right? Constant effort to benefit those who need the most help. Like, I'm okay with student loans being canceled, right? Like, if we kind of wrap this all into that, right? It's unfair to me. I got no loans, right? It may be unfair to my kids who don't yet have loans and may end up taking loans. Which, you know what, if we cancel student loans, and let's say we put a cap on it, cancel student loans with every family making less than 150, I'm good with that. If it excludes me, then fine. Because
I wanted to include me no matter what.
So I'm okay with saying let's help those who don't, right? And I think that there's a very Americanness with pretending we care about those who don't have more while doing everything to keep them down.
Well, Stephanie and I were having a conversation recently about how people seem to believe that as Black people, once we get to a certain wealth level, we are no longer impacted by Blackness. Stephanie, did you want to touch on that before Akil kind of gets into it as well?
I find that really, really frustrating in my situation, because it's like, I don't know why they think that all our like issues or that we don't face the same problems just because we've been able to reach this certain point. And I think people don't necessarily recognize that once like a Black family gets to this high income, it's not generational wealth. It's not something that's backed by all these things like that. They're probably the first ones in their family to get to that point.
And I'm going to add to that because my mother was the first person in her family to go to college. It was just because some counselor tracked her down and said, you're going to college, and applied for her and put in all the FAFSAs and things like that, which now I'm like, oh my God, I just replicated the same exact thing. But, and so when my family members have situations, all of them were probably able to go to college. My mother went during the time of segregation, but they didn't have the opportunity. It feels like this pot is for us. This money pot is not just one person, right? I think people don't understand the distribution of wealth, but also that Black students face issues of not getting into AP, isolation when you are in these AP classes, being the only person, being alienated from the Black community and told that you're not Black enough now, not being white enough, not being enough, and then having all of these bias factors working against you. What do you say to things like that? And how do we consider those kind of things?
I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff in what you y'all trying to go all kinds of things here. But I think that like there's a number of different threads you have to pull out there. There's one, the question of generational wealth, which is absolutely a thing. I used to tutor a lot of GMAT people trying to get into business school, so they already had college degrees.
Mhm.
And for the most part, or often, students of color would be supporting family members, and we'd have conversations. They're supporting family members either who came before them or who come after them,
Mhm.
right? And my white students are often getting support,
Yeah.
right? Which is the advantage of generational wealth. It makes things easier. You get a
Mhm.
house given to you by mommy, it makes things
I
easier.
forgot that they get houses. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So there's all of these things that become, part of that. And then when you start talking land and houses, now you're getting into redlining and Central Park, I found out, used to be a black village.
Yeah.
They co-opted that and they took it away to
Mhm.
build Central Park.
Yeah.
Right. So there's all of this history that's tied into kind of all these conversations. So you'll never be able to separate them. Right.
Mhm.
And for me, what I think about is, what can I address? I never quibble about what someone chooses as a personal choice. Like, and I'm still an SAT tutor. If you go on the internets, you can find me listed for hundreds of dollars an hour to tutor for the SAT. Right.
Mhm.
And my full-time day job is working for FairTest. So my full-time job is to get rid of my more lucrative part-time job.
Yeah. Same.
Right.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a matter of privilege offset. Right. I need to eat. My children need sneakers. So I'm going to do the things to live that I need to do.
Mhm.
But I'm not going to work for a system that advantages me and disadvantages others.
Mhm.
So while I live in an unfair system and I'm going to operate in the system in which I live in, I'm going to work to improve that system.
When you sent out the highly rejective tweet, was it a tweet?
It was a tweet. That all started with a tweet. I talked about highly rejected colleges.
Tweet, yeah.
Yes.
When you sent it out, did you think it was profound at the time? Because there's sometimes that I send a tweet, I'm like, this is profound, and then people don't notice it, and I'm like, okay, but it's still really profound.
All my tweets are profound. All my tweets are profound.
At what point did you realize it was catching on, and why did you feel like you wanted to? I don't feel like at the time you thought, I'm inventing a term. It was just a statement of fact, right?
It's weird. It's kind of funny to me. I realize I live in this kind of weird intellectual space of, I can poo-poo things that I don't like that they exist, while I realize that they do exist and you have to deal with them, right? And to me, highly rejective is kind of like that. I think really, for a long time, I've said in different ways. I actually have a Stanvard t-shirt that I thought about wearing today, which to me is almost the same comment, right? It's commentary on how obsessed we are with these spaces that build their prestige on denying entry. Right. So I started using the term Stanvard because I refused to mention the name of those 8 or 10 schools that people pretend are the epitome of American education. They may be good institutions, but to me, again, it's like Yeezys. It's not necessarily the quality of the product, it's the brand name. And so that's what highly rejective was to me. It's just a calling out of the obsession with brand and exclusivity that ignores all other factors. And it's also kind of just as bad as highly selective, right? Like, neither of those things say anything about the quality of an institution. Right? Baruch College, which doesn't have the same prestige, it has like a 30% admissions rate. Right? It's also a highly rejective college, but it's a city college in New York, and it's highly rejective simply because the volume of people who apply there. Right? And so, there's all of these conundrums around perceived quality that exist in the educational space. And I think the highly rejective term, when I just sort of threw it out there, it was really more me just saying, okay, we got to stop obsessing with branding and obsessing with these metrics that kind of mean nothing.
Sydney and Stephanie, how did branding impact your decisions as you went into this college? Look at Sydney. When you went into these colleges searches, Sydney, I'm going to go to you, and then Stephanie, I'm coming to you.
It was more because I'm part of this select pool of gifted kids gets burnt out when they get into high school. So it was just like looking at my peers who weren't as burnt out as I was, and they were like, oh, I want to apply to this school, I want to apply to this school, I want to apply to this school, I want to go out of state, I want to do this. And it was just like, okay, well, I'm going to do my best to get into these schools. These are great schools in Virginia, but it's not this school. Mm-hmm. This is this school, but it's not that school. And, especially when decisions were coming out and people were, talking about their rejections and their acceptances. And it's like, you see other people get into these schools, and other people's reactions to those people getting into schools also play a big part. It's like someone would be like, oh, you got into this school, good job. But someone says, oh, I got into this school, wow, oh my gosh. Like, and you're happy for them because you worked hard for it, but it's not seen on the same level, it seems like. So yeah, for me, applying to schools, I personally was not going to go to any Ivy League school for undergrad, just because I knew how expensive it would be and how far away it would be, and I wasn't trying to do that. But
it makes me sad.
Does it make you sad?
Here's why that makes me sad. Because she dismissed the school without all the information.
Yeah.
It actually could have been cheaper. You don't know. And, my niece applied to NYU, which has a notorious reputation for terrible financial aid.
Yeah.
Right? And I had my friend act as her independent counselor. She got into NYU. She got a buttload of money. Neither of us actually have any clue why.
Yeah.
And that's both the good and the bad of college admissions, right? Because so much of it is opaque. So much of it is unknown because institutions have their own priorities, right? And our perception of what goes on in admissions and financial aid isn't actually complete, right? It's never actually complete, right? And that's part of why Varsity Blues was able to work. Because every institution is like, well, we got a sailing team, so I need some sailors. So go get me some sailors, right? Like, yeah, they have lower grades, but I still need a sailor. If they could sail, then we're gonna let them in with lower test scores. So that makes sense when you're trying to field a sailing team for the university as well.
Yeah, Stephanie, you and I talked about Merit Aid, and I'm gonna ask you about the branding as well. But you and I have talked about the perception that if I work hard, I'm going to get Merit Aid, right? Like that. It's like, if I do this AP, the thing that caught me at the end of the movie when the girl was like, I took AP environmental and biology, and I hated it. And I was like, oh my God.
No, people do that. Yeah. Like, people I know take those classes or join clubs that they might not have interest in, or maybe, push for a certain sport, or stressed because they feel like they're not doing enough because they feel like, if I do X, Y, Z, I'll get more money or I'll get into the school.
And Stephanie, you and I have talked about that. Like, can you tell us what? Because I got group chat text messages that's like, how are they only going to give me blah, blah? I've been working hard. Stephanie, can you talk about your conception of Merit Aid and what you thought it was about before this admission season? And also branding and whether that impacted you, because I know you have a story.
Yeah, so for me, I've surrounded my entire life since I was like 9 years old around this moment right now, like deciding where to go to college and this whole college process. So, I always had the mentality, if I work, if I push a little bit more, if I do this much more, then it'll happen to me. It has to happen. It has to happen for me. Like, I have to get these things. I have to get these merit scholarships. Like, it only makes sense that after all this work, that's what would yield. So when that didn't happen, it was really heartbreaking because that's what I had spent my entire life doing. No matter what, even though I was doing things I loved, I never took a class that absolutely hated, unlike that girl. But at the back of my mind, everything I did, it was for a purpose, and it was to ensure that I would be in the exact position that I wanted to be right now. And when that didn't happen, it was, of course, heartbreaking. I was really upset about it. I couldn't understand it. But of course you explained it to me. So now I get it. I still have to process it, but
I essentially told her, I was like, you did everything right according to the formula. You were following the wrong formula. Like,
Yeah.
and I didn't even know, I don't think I even knew a good formula until it clicked maybe last year, and then I propelled it this year. So, Akil, you hear all of that, and then you also talked about IVs. What's your response when you hear students like, I thought I was about to get some money for like trading in APs and trading in grades and trading in now?
I mean, I think looking at education and the college system, right? The way I look at it is there's not a system, right? I think like if you look at America, the education system, K-12, right? States' rights. So each state and really each district, each city does their own thing. That doesn't change when you get to college. So there's kind of no real system, which is what creates all this flux. It's not like England where there's a very clear trajectory of if you do X, Y, and Z, you get X, Y, and Z at the end of it. We pretend that's the case, but it's not actually true and it's never been true, right? So part of the challenge in all of this is that it's really hard to look forward to say, you know, I'm in 8th grade, I'm going to project out 4 years and do the exact right things to accomplish this goal. Right. And so that creates this sort of feeding frenzy around doing all the things. It's what to a certain extent drives the lack of faith in test optional. Right. Because and I get it. How am I going to tell somebody that when they tell you you can choose to send an extra piece of information and it might help you get into our school that has a 10% admission rate, you can be like, nah, I'm not going to send it. Right? If they told you to show up in a pink tutu and a Wonder Woman costume, you do it because maybe you get in. Right? So I think there's so much in this system that we end up saying, maybe it will help. That we try to, so I think that there's a decision that has to be made. Are you going to simply pursue the best education for yourself and do the things that make you happy and try to do those things really well, or are you going to play the game? And the playing the game leads you to the Varsity Blues thing where they're like, I'm going to play every angle that I can to accomplish this very narrow, specific objective that I have, without actually tying it to any outcomes. And I think part of what Stephanie said that got me a little bit was her goal was college. Who cares about college? You're going to beat it, hopefully, for 4 years. The goal should be what happens after college, right? So like college is a means to an end. But far too often, we've created this whole conversation that's like, get to college, as if that solves all the problems, right? After you graduate college, you're still going to be Black in America. So you still gonna have to figure stuff out.
I feel like that was for
debt.
Yeah,
right.
Black in debt in college.
Right. Even Black in America in debt, right? Like,
Right.
so we want to, like, if I can't solve Black, I probably am not gonna solve in America. So I do want to minimize in debt.
So,
right. So, and maybe it's worth it playing the prestige game at that time because it might help minimize the in debt thing. So there's a very personal conversation here.
Do you think? Okay, I had a question here. Does Ivy give you a lifetime advantage over other candidates in the job market?
Okay, so let me start with, y'all know I said highly rejective, right? So let me start with that. Let me also say, can I prove that it hurts?
Yeah, if you could, like I'm not gonna be like, no, you can't prove that.
I don't know that it hurts. I don't know that it helps, but I don't know that it hurts. So that's why I think it's important conversations. Like at the end of the day, am I going to pay $60,000 a year to go to Stanford instead of $2,000 a year to go to Howard? Absolutely not. Right? But if it's equal cost, then maybe if they have equal programs, like, and I think one of the things we were talking about the other day, Jen, was, you know, for one of your students who are thinking about a HBCU versus a free ride at a predominantly white school, right? It's like, how much does it cost for your sanity?
Yeah,
I'm going to go into Elon, which is,
right.
Yeah. Elon is 92% white. Elon's been getting all kinds of shine in the last 5 years, but I think they're 92% white. So a free ride at Elon versus $10,000 a year at Howard. I'm going to Howard. I'm telling my kid to go to Howard because your peace of mind for 10 years it damn sure ain't worth 10 grand a year.
I mean, when I watched the Beyonce Homecoming, I was like, oh, I should have gone to the I don't have Beyonce money to essentially create my own HBCU on stage.
Right.
But I think there is something, and I think that's the thing that we've been talking about. I mean, Stephanie knows on with Anna the other day, I was like, I came on the call and I was like, Stephanie, you need to go here. You need to go here. Stop talking about blah, blah, blah. And then I just watched Stephanie's face as she was listening. And I realized this one college that she really likes and this other college that she would be settling for, she would be incredibly unhappy at that one college. And Stephanie, can you tell us, like, because you thought about rankings as you were picking at one point, and then you kind of moved away from that. Let's look at your
rankings are the devil. U.S. News is the worst thing ever.
We're gonna get to that.
I used to do that. I used to Google like the U.S. News thing and be like, okay, why is the school number one? What do they have? What do they have? Okay, cool. And then
I'm gonna let him answer that. But Stephanie, I know you also. Sydney did it. Stephanie, you were doing it. Were you looking? You were looking at rejection rates, right?
Yes. Kind of. It was kind of like a.
Were you the one that was like, I'm not applying to a school that's rejection rate of lower than, or is that somebody else?
That was
okay.
Yeah.
So how did the rejections and the rankings shape? I'll go Stephanie and then Sydney and then Akil. You can tell us why that they shouldn't. But Stephanie, how did it shape your admissions?
Mm-hmm. So basically, it's all started. I got obsessed with rankings when it all started when my mom was like, we'd be sitting there and I'd be talking about a specific school, and then she'd be like, "What's ranking?" And then after that, and then I'll be talking about a school that she probably never heard of, right? And then after that, she's like, "Oh, that doesn't sound too great." And as soon as I told her the ranking, she's like, "Oh, okay, that's what we need to do." And then so that's kind of where it started. And I would look at the rankings. For me, it wasn't. I didn't use it to intimidate me, which is very rare. I find that a lot of people do find they get intimidated by those numbers, but I used it to help motivate me and to, I guess, kind of just keep me informed. I rather know the numbers than not know them, but I wouldn't say that it kept me from applying to any certain school.
Sydney, rankings in your search, did you use them at all? Did you look at them at all? Are you considering them at all?
Yes and no. I kind of looked at them out of curiosity because I wanted to know what made them so, what gave them that place. I assumed it was maybe because of the resources they had, or the connections they had, and maybe the location and stuff like that. But for me, it was more about curiosity. I kind of learned on my own to just dead the whole, number one, number two, number three, and just go with whatever you're going to be happy at and whatever's going to cost you less in the long run, with your sanity, financially, everything.
And
so
then,
for me, it's about curiosity.
Akil, when you hear about rankings, how do you feel inside right now, just listening to people discuss rankings?
I actually especially how Sydney is talking about rankings. It is an interesting curiosity. But rankings, if you don't look at the methodology, you have to look at the methodology of all rankings. And when you look at the methodologies, that's what annoys me because they mean nothing. The first U.S. News ranking was entirely reputation. Mm-hmm. Right now, the current U.S. News ranking, which they change pretty much every year. So one, how did the same schools stay ranked? But part of it is that they
MIT, then Yale, then Harvard, and then it switched to Yale, and then it was they
rejigger them a little bit, but it's all the same. Now, because the ranking is self-validating, right? They created their metric, and then when they created the new metric, they're making sure that it doesn't go too far from the old one. Mm-hmm. So it's so you can choose criteria. It's as if I were to say, I'm going to independently choose the characteristic for who I'll marry, right? She has to have braids. I don't care about skin color, but she has to be able to braid her hair so that she looks like people from Nigeria. That's independent, right? Because that's independent category, right? And that's kind of what they do. Choose these characteristics that it's not this, but yeah, it is. And rankings often mean to me, it's BS categories that they've quantified to hide that all they're really measuring is wealth and historic wealth. They count alumni giving in rankings, which means only rich schools will get that bump, right? Because if you're working with your school is 60% Pell eligible kids. Guess what? When they graduate, they're still not wealthy. The likelihood of donating back to their alma mater is fairly low. So why is alumni giving a part of that? And you see it every year on Twitter. Colleges running campaigns. Donate, donate, donate. We want 100%. So that they get that bump on U.S. News.
Right.
So faculty pay is part of that. Almost all the criteria in U.S. News rankings have nothing to do with the students or the education. It has to do with the wealth and the resources. And that's why I hate rankings.
I mean,
I also looked at like schools with like the happiest student body. And like,
oh God! Don't look at Princeton Review. Princeton Review is also horrible. If you look at, so here's how Princeton Review does rankings, right?
Like
Princeton Review chooses.
I was like, oh, that's.
But Princeton Review is a joke. They choose 500 or so schools and mail them surveys, and then they rank the ones that return the surveys. So essentially, they've pre-ranked them before they actually sent out, because they didn't send the surveys to all the schools.
Right.
They sent the surveys to the schools they chose in advance. And so it's entirely based on student surveys at places they chose to rank. So guess what? They probably never mailed it to Howard.
Right.
Therefore, Howard isn't ranked. But they don't tell you this. They don't tell you this is our rankings of the schools we chose to send surveys to.
Right.
They tell you it's the best colleges.
I mean, as a Hokie, our team always gets ranked, and then we're always, I mean, I feel like when we were with Beamer, we always got ranked because it was just like we Virginia Tech, we might be losing, but we're still coming out to a bowl game. So, that was looking at the rankings from that perspective, but also I see so many students get fixated and focused on these things. And making decisions with these things, and another Hokie's here. See, and you're like, you think to yourself, I mean, Stephanie knows my saying. What's my saying about admissions, Stephanie?
Everything is a lie.
Everything is a lie. It's like, I'm like,
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
What part is not a lie in admissions? Tell me what part you feel is not a lie.
None of it is a lie. It's all
You're being
marketing.
A lawyer today.
I'm not being a lawyer. I'm always nuanced.
Right. Everything's
It's
not
all
a lie.
marketing.
Those are nice lies.
They're secrets. It's just the things that they keep from us.
And I think that's the thing. I think what people don't realize is, in the absence of you giving the students a formula, students like Stephanie, students like Sydney go into group chats. They go into YouTube. They go into Reddit. They go into now TikTok. And I get messages from them like, this person, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not going to talk to this person. And then 50 hours later, I'm still arguing with this person. I'm like, But
that's the problem. That's sort of the good and the bad of American
It's good and bad,
right? Is like, and not everything, right? Because there are certain colleges. CUNY used to be actually like that before they went test free. CUNY used to say GPA plus test score equals admitted or not. So there are many institutions that do practice formulaic admissions, and it's very clear and very transparent. They might have a grid on their website with the admissions criteria and the scholarship criteria, right? So I think there's that part of things. But what's funny is that like everybody argues for holistic admissions until it works against them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everybody wants holistic admissions until you don't get into the place you want to go to.
Well, it's like the Larry David episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. What do you want the rule to be? Me first. I want the rule to be I go first. I get in, me first. So I think that's the thing. And I think once you realize, I had a student the other day, and I could preach all day like, oh yeah, we should do everything for admissions. But she's like, I'm dropping English, and I'm not doing advanced English, and I'm doing regular English. And I was like, like, And I had to say to myself, it's not STEM. It's not STEM. She's still on the road for calculus. It's not STEM. It's not STEM. But then I also realized, I said to her, just inform her of this is how it may impact. Do you care? And she's like, I don't care about any of that.
That's the whole deal. You got to figure out what you care about.
You can also play a perfect game. Like I've had students with perfect scores, perfect GPA, really good essays, really whatever, still rejected. And I don't think we ever talk about that, especially as IECs. We always put up, these are my students who got in. And I always tell parents, if you're going to hire somebody, ask them, what happens when my student doesn't get in? What do you do? How do you?
I also think doesn't get in is kind of the wrong framing, because almost all students get in somewhere.
Yeah.
The ones who don't get in, they applied really narrowly.
Yeah.
And they were Varsity Blues light, where it was this school or nothing, or my life is over.
Right.
And
like that movie you forced us all to watch. Remember that? It was another movie on Netflix.
Terrible Netflix movie.
Yeah, it was like, it's like, we're all so burnt out. I'm like, you don't have to play this game now. It's like, because we've all been forced to, do everything for admissions. You don't have to do it.
Right. Because you can. I mean, New York City. I'm in New York City, so there's lots. There's CUNY system, there's SUNY system. There's no one who graduates from a New York City public high school that should say I did not get into college. Now, it may be I did not get into colleges I wanted to get into. It may be I did not get into college I was hoping for. But I did not get into college means that you didn't apply properly, because more than half the colleges in the country admit more than 60% of their applicants.
Right.
Right. It's a question of, again, I think there's that same sort of thing where people like, can I get into that club? Can I get those special new shoes? Like, because you want that special one thing and you ignore all the other things. Right. But if college is about an education, there are lots of good places to get a strong education. And also, the obsession is the problem.
You could be applying rolling. I mean, I know my Virginia Tech letter came in late. It was a letter. The other day I was on something and they're like, it's not like the olden, it was to all the boys, whatever. And she was like, in the olden days, they used to send letters. And I was like, but Virginia Tech, I know there's another Hokie here, used to send this letter and it would say your acceptance to Virginia Tech on the letter front, so that you knew the minute you got the letter whether you were in or not in. And I just remember thinking, okay, we're getting close. I haven't gotten an acceptance yet. And I just started looking at the rolling admissions, and I was about to apply when I got the letter to Virginia Tech. But I had applied very narrowly, and I did not know that I had applied very narrowly until after the fact. So, yeah. If there's anybody who has any questions, Sydney and Stephanie, do you have any last minute questions?
I just had like a comment. Another thing people I've noticed our age do is like, especially with like social media, like TikTok and stuff, when people post their decisions, you'll see like comments like, what were your stats? What were your stats? What were your stats? And then the person will make a video and it's like, okay, I got a 1450 on my SAT, was in this club, this was my GPA. They're like, oh, okay, like if I can be like this person, then maybe. And it's just like, so.
And that's how you end up in AP environmental science.
Yeah.
Here's my advice for you guys. Lie. Going forward, you owe nobody the truth whatsoever. Anybody from this moment forward who asks you your SAT score, I give you permission. You are now blessed by the national testing expert. Your answer going forward is 1560. Because anybody who asks you your SAT score, now I'm not talking about like, something real, like some college you choose to apply to. I'm talking like somebody, some random at the college, right? They ain't asking you to tell you did good. They're asking you to try to shame you. So anybody asking your SAT score from this moment forward, you lie to them. And then you watch their face fall when the number is higher than theirs. Right? So you don't have to share nothing about this process with no one. All those TikTok videos, they're all incomplete. They're not sharing their essay. They're not sharing the profile of the universities they apply to. They're not sharing any of that stuff that actually influenced those decisions, right? So, people will believe me if I tell them I got a perfect score on every standardized test that exists. That may or may not be true. right? And who cares? Right. So I think that one of the things that we have to realize is not buying into all this BS where people are trying to diminish your accomplishments and find ways to tell you that, which is often why people use scores, after you've been admitted to college. They want to know, oh, you didn't have better numbers than me. Why'd they let you in?
Yeah, I think that's the thing is I actually was in Alabama at a job, and these people who were at a lower ranked school than mine for law school were like, what was your LSAT? And I just remember playing it so perfectly. I was like, well, the first time I got like a 155, and they were like, I was like, but the second time I did much better, and I got a 167, and I don't even know how I got that. Because I knew what they were saying is you weren't qualified to go to law school where you were going. And I'm like, it wasn't the LSAT. It was the fact that I was published by the time that I was probably 25 and like 15 other random things that I did that closed it. It probably I think what people don't realize is you could play this game perfectly. You can achieve this perfect score. You can do everything and you can still get rejected. So you might as well do what you want to do and stop thinking about, is it going to lead to admissions, and parents as well? Because I think sometimes, I keep saying that I need to wear Olivia Jade pink, and I'm going to do that one day. But I think Olivia Jade had this great career.
Yeah, she did. She didn't have to go to college.
And she didn't have to go, but her parents, no.
That's what kills me about the whole thing.
I would love to, Olivia, if you're out there, come on, let's talk about it. But yeah.
I think
if I have $500,000 to show around, I'm just going to give it to my kids and be like, yo, y'all work it out. If you can't make this $500,000 turn into a good life, then you deserve what you get. Right? Because they took couch, they paid $500,000 for SAT prep or whatever it was, SAT cheating before they got into the school. They didn't pay tuition yet.
Rick was so good at being like, they're like, oh yeah, no way. There's no way. And people now, even now, when I post things, and I post them because I just like to see Black girls succeeding, right? But when I post them, they're like, okay, what's the secret? What's the secret? I'm like, I don't know. It was like, it just happened. Like, do I know some successful aspects of applications? Maybe, but does it work every single time? You know what works every single time? Giving money for a really, 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 really long time, establishing really deep connections, and then putting maybe 3 generations in might give you an advantage one time. But I also know our school is a school of Kennedys for UVA law, and not every Kennedy got into UVA law. So if the Kennedys can't do it, maybe we should all think about our choices here. So I think we're pretty much wrapped up. Sydney, Stephanie, anything last to say? Akil, do you have any parting words? I'm going to go Akil first, Sydney, Stephanie, whatever. Y'all can just jump in.
Keep sane and, look for educational outcomes, educational value and career outcomes more so than prestige. And things should work out. Okay.
Stephanie, Sydney, last thoughts?
I think I feel better about the colleges and going to school in Virginia. I really like this chat. I feel like it was good to talk about it and get it out there and debunk some things that we didn't know, because a lot of students don't know, I guess, the math or the formula behind why they didn't get in or why some people did, or the whole admissions process. So I feel like talks like these are really important for students to understand that, listen, wherever you go, you'll be fine.
Stephanie is, we're 9 days. I know this because I know how many days until freedom, but we're 9 days technically from decision day. Stephanie, last parting words.
So I was just gonna add on to what Sydney said. You're gonna end up where you need to be. And it might everything's going to take an adjustment, but at the end of the day, you're going to end up on the right path. And one small decision isn't going to derail everything you have planned. And
my thing is you could do it perfect and still fail. And that's life. So you might as well not take AP environmental science. I actually loved environmental science, but because I had a great teacher. But yeah, you could fail. You could get the perfect score and still resent it. So don't do anything that you'll later resent. Okay. So I'm going to end the broadcast. Chloe's here to talk after this, but I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you guys so much for attending. If you have any questions, Akil, can you tell them where to find you online, which you're always online?
Why am I always online? That's rude. Don't say that about me.
I mean, highly
fine.
rejected
I'm always
came
on Twitter.
online.
Miss Jenn,
you
you're
are.
always online too. Every time I look on Twitter, you're arguing with someone.
Yeah.
Sydney, did we need to say that at the last minute? Like, no, I'm a very peaceful person on Twitter, you know?
I am on Twitter at Akil Bello. Nice and simple. You know, I'm there. I respond to messages and such.
And please,
what about
go
your
ahead.
business, like your testing business?
I do a little bit of test prep here and there, but that's not my main gig. That's my side gig when you know, my children need some sneakers, or I want to make a donation to a woman for New York City mayor. I do some tutoring, so I can fund that.
We'll take donations as well, so you can go work.
Yes,
Yeah, he's always online. Please go ahead and tweet him about writing a book. Please go ahead and tweet him about doing a documentary. We would love to see those things. Let's log off before he can say anything about, no, I'm not doing it. Thank you guys so much, and I'm going to log off. We'll be here once it logs off, guys. All right, bye.